from the scholarly journal, The Foreign Quarterly Review, Volume 18, published in London in 1837. The Foreign Quarterly Review has many volumes. I found this article in Volume 18, around page 31, where the article starts, about a couple of pages there in this article. So again, this is mostly a recount of an expedition done in 1805, 1806, 1807 by this guy named Dupaix and his team, a French team hired by the Mexican Archaeological whatever institute or department or society. And yeah, so they are, a lot of this work, a lot of his illustrations is mentioned actually in Lord Kingsborough's Antiquities of Mexico. So this article mentions Lord Kingsborough, and his illustrations and his work in his books, Antiquities of Mexico. So just a little background of who Lord Kingsborough was, right? And Wikipedia tells us that he was an Irish antiquarian who sought to prove that the indigenous peoples of the Americas were a lost tribe of Israel. All right, so you see, not just my theory, we're not just making things up. This is actually ideas that these early settlers, conquistadors, conquerors, so-called explorers had because of what they were seeing and encountering when they came over here. Again, he wrote the book Antiquities of Mexico, comprising facsimiles. Facsimiles means an exact copy of ancient Mexican paintings and hieroglyphics, and is presented in the Royal Libraries of Paris, Berlin, Dresden, in the Imperial Library of Vienna, in the Vatican Library, in the Borgian Museum at Rome, in the Library of the Institute of Bologna, and in the Edokian Library at Oxford. The Monuments of New Spain by M. Dupaix. All right, so that's volume 1 of cover, as you can see. So we have 7 volumes actually of this. 9 volumes of Antiquities of Mexico. And most of the first 3 volumes is all illustrations and codices, the Mayas or the Aztecs of Mexico, such as this. This is actually from Dupaix. We're going to read his article, but I wanted to show you the illustrations he actually has in this book, Antiquities of Mexico, made by Lord Kingsborough. So again, you see Monuments of New Spain by M. Dupaix, from the original drawings executed by the order of the King of Spain. All right, so as you can see, this is some of his drawings. That looks like a speaker there. That's crazy. You can see, the cross, or the original crossing of the ley lines, the representation of the mark, the monument, the cross sticks, the sign, right? The emblem of the Garden of Eden. We're going to get to that. Yeah, right. So just so you guys can get a little background of the article that we're going to read. Try to get through the whole thing. So we go to page 31, where Article 2 starts, as you guys see, Antiquities Mexicanas, the relations of the expedition of Captain Dupaix. That's in French right there. 1805, 1806, 1807, right? That's the translation I did. Okay, and it says here, the subject comprehended in the 3 important works which we have made the text of the ensuing article will be found to possess those features of novelty and originality which we deem of paramount importance in order to attract public attention to any antiquarian subject whatever. The antiquarian discoveries recently made in Spanish America may on the threshold of the inquiry be at once pronounced to be equal in interest and importance to those Egyptian discoveries, just as important, just as great, to which we have called the attention of our readers, while so lately recording the last triumphs in this department of Rossellini and Champollion. If the former investigation were calculated to startle the reader by the unique novelty of the historical incidents and personages which it summoned up before his eyes as by the spell of a magician, the facts, historical or otherwise, which the present investigation is calculated to bring to light, will be found not less startling by their novelty than curious by their antiquarian coincidences and important by their mythological, historical, and geographical revelations. All right, he's actually about to get real deep. The comparisons he's going to do, what he found here in Palenque. Again, this is one of the first peoples going over there exploring. The place is still in ruins. They still have to remove a lot of debris, but what they're finding, he's going to let us know here in this article. The subject of Mexican antiquities possesses, moreover, the advantage of being less hackneyed than the subject of Egyptian antiquities. It is comparatively a virgin soil. The golden ore remains in the mine, little worked and scarcely known. The searching eye of some few antiquarians has indeed been enabled to discover the intrinsic value of the buried metal, but they have either seen it dimly through the dark and obstructed channels by which they obtained access to it, or have themselves contributed to render it undistinguishable by the public by encumbering it with new mountains of pandantic lumber in the very act of digging downwards to the buried treasures. So what he's trying to say is, yeah, they've been kind of like exploring here before. They never really done a real exploration like he's conducting right now, and they've been neglecting this area. And so when they come here, they come with their old world over there biases. They've seen it in reverse. That's what he's kind of literally saying right here. And they kind of downplay what's over here, these buried treasures, as he's saying. To the public generally, the mine, and he's calling these ruins, these ancient civilizations, he's comparing it to a mine, that has so much gold that they missed. Rich as it is, these ruins, rich as it is in the most precious veins of antiquarian information, may be considered as all but closed. Mexican antiquities, for reasons which may be briefly stated, may be pronounced a sealed book. It is for the purpose of throwing a new light of interpretation on its mysterious pages that this paper is undertaken. He's telling you straight up, and this time when he wrote this, right? Remember this how old this is, this article. They didn't care about this area. They were neglecting it. So he's trying to bring out the information, the amazing things he found in this place. In pursuing the investigation, we shall endeavor to keep in view the same guiding principle by which we were governed, while bringing out into high relief the most novel points of Egyptian discovery, namely that of popularizing the subject by divesting it of the voluminous and repulsive pedantry by which it has been hitherto overlaid. He's saying they've been overhyping the so-called Egypt over there. Again, the voluminous and repulsive pedantry by which it has been hitherto overlaid. Has been overhyped. All the attention over there, they've been neglecting America. If we have triumphantly appealed to the chief characteristic of our previous Egyptian investigation, for example, the startling novelty of producing a new volume in the role of history, and of eliciting, as it were, a new pagan Genesis, concurrent with and corroborative of the Bible, we think that before we have concluded, we shall establish the fact that this investigation is imbued with the same popular character of excitement and attractiveness, just like what they're finding over there. Just all that emotion and excitement they have about digging stuff over there and what they're calling the old world. It should be the same over here, and he feels the same. It's the same. The excitement and attractiveness is the same here. The first circumstance calculated to rouse surprise on surveying the stupendous, grotesque, or magnificent monuments of a bygone people, to which the illustration of the volumes which head our article introduce the reader, is the carelessness or the supineness with which they have been overlooked or disregarded. Again, they have been overlooked, disregarded, and they still are, guys. Even in 2024, they downplay, they give us a false history, a wrong chronology, false dates, all that. Robertson, impressed with the same incredulous feeling, or betrayed by the Spaniards, whose interest at that time it was to keep him in the dark, went so far in his History of America as to say that there is not, in all the extent of New Spain, any monument or vestige of building more ancient than the conquest, that the Temple of Cholula was nothing but a mound of solid earth without any facing or any steps, covered with grass or shrubs, and that the houses of the people of Mexico were but huts built with turf or branches of trees like those of the rudest Indians. All right, see what he's saying, that other guy? Gosh, the hijack. The same acute and cautious historian merely observes in a cursory manner that the unfortunate Boturioni or Buturiori made an amazing catalog of Mexican maps, paintings, tribute rolls, calendars, etc., which were lost, so-called lost or burned, right, hidden, maybe in the Vatican vault. In another passage, he threads as a matter of great suspicion the authenticity of the chronological wheel by which the Mexicans computed time, a specimen which was published by Carrieri, while the monument itself was actually brought to this country by Mr. Bullock. If it be genuine, he coldly says, it proves that the Mexicans had arbitrary characters, which represent several things besides numbers. It is surprising that so acute a critic as Robertson did not feel some suspicion before he hazarded such contemptuous decisions, that he was either misinformed or too precipitate in his judgment, a fact which he himself states ought to have impressed him with due circumspection, referring to the Mexican people, who we shall be able to show were really in a state of barbarism comparatively with the Toltecs, whom they superseded. He yet is forced to admit that the Mexicans clearly deriving their institutions from the Toltecans. Okay, so right here, when he's saying Mexicans, he's talking about the later groups, the Mexican or Aztecs, who came later after the Toltecas. That's what he's saying right here. Were advanced, so the clearly deriving their institutions from the Toltecans, which were advanced at the time of the Spanish conquest beyond the then extinct points of European civilization, in two most distinguishing particulars, namely, in regard to their well established police, they had police embracing a regular supply of water and sewers, and in regard to the regular posts that they had established. Since the period of Robertson's, new light has been successively thrown on the subject, and the vague mist of incredulous ignorance, in the midst of which he recorded these disproved opinions, have been cleared away. Humboldt has since then published his amusing and eloquent account of the monuments that still exist in Central America. And we've read Alexander Humboldt's book a little bit. We're going to definitely get back into it a lot more. He says a Spanish writer, very little known, named Del Rio, in 1780s, published his description of the ruins of an ancient city lately discovered in the kingdom of Guatemala. So this is one of the real first persons who actually went into Palenque. It even have a name. He's just calling it these ruins of this ancient city. And he also did a lot of incredible work. And this is where Dupaix kind of got inspired to go back and see it for himself. And he adds to it. He's gonna mention some of Del Rio's findings. He's gonna mention his findings. So of course they're calling this the Kingdom of Guatemala, right? This last work, although it may be said to have been scarcely published in this country, and at all events to have lapsed into a condition of obscurity, supplies more curious and valuable information than Humboldt on the subject. Since then, the English public have been made particularly more familiar with their existence and their characteristics by the exhibition of Mexican antiquities brought by Mr. Bullock to this country. We are, however, bound to say that the exhibition tended to impart rather a low idea of Mexican proficiency in the arts, that it was calculated to confound two races of people, the conquerors and the conquered, both totally distinct, and still to retain in shadow the truth which has rapidly dawned on the world of antiquarian literature, that there exists in New Spain the monuments of a highly civilized people who preceded the Mexicans or the Aztecs, as stupendous, as tasteful, and as wonderful as those of Egypt, all right, before the Aztecs. Since the last mentioned work, those which head our article have been published. They demonstrate that the attention of the learned world has been thoroughly awakened to the interest and importance of the subject. Nebel's archaeological voyage, though extremely limited in the amount of its illustrations, is the most splendid in the execution of their details. But the most authentic and complete account which we have of these monuments results from a commission sent out for the purpose of investigating them under the authority of the Spanish government. And this is what we're going to read today. It was headed by Dupaix, all right, who was published an ample account of three scientific expeditions undertaken by him for their investigation. To these results may be added the fruits of an additional commission confided by the local Mexican government to M. Barader. They, however, add little to the facts collected by Dupaix, who must in truth be considered as the chief and best authority for all legitimate inferences on this subject. And his exploration report, what he found is what we're going to read today, guys. Are one of the most legit, you know. The illustrations of Dupaix are embodied in the magnificent and expensive work entitled Antiquities Mexicanas. All right, that's from Lord Kingsborough. I've shown that before. Printed in Paris and published in numbers at the Bureau des Antiquités Mexicanes. This work is one of those which we have deemed necessary to place at the head of our article. Notwithstanding the apparently official mantle thus attractively thrown over the French publication in question, we are bound in justice to tear away its masquerade dress, and to state that the greater part of it is nothing more than a reprint of Augustin Anglo's illustrations drawn from the work of Dupaix, and already incorporated with the great work of Lord Kingsborough, entitled Mexican Antiquities. A little variety is sought to be obtained by coloring the drawings and by occasionally imparting to them picturesque, and therefore we apprehend the deceptive effects. The descriptions attached to the Parisian illustrations are of no great depth or value, but they have the merit of being perspicuous in meaning and brief in form. They possess thereby the superior advantage of being publishable, which Lord Kingsborough's work is not. The work of the noble lord possesses characteristics quite sufficient to repel the most determined book devourer from attempting to surf it on the gigantic meal embodied in its voluminous pages. It is in reality an ill-arranged, undigested mass of every class of contribution in which the editorial work and the scissors and paste work are confusedly blended in half a dozen languages, some translated, some not translated, with notes piled upon notes, producing confusion worse confounded. The mischief is considerably augmented by an extraordinary theory which pervades all of the original composition, and of the truth of which the noble author appears to have been as convinced as of any truth and holy right. This theory is that America, listen to this, was peopled by the 10 Jewish tribes carried away by Shalmaneser, king of Assyria. Huh. And that not only the Mexicans or Mexicans, but the founders of the extraordinary monuments preserved in the illustrations of his lordship's work were so-called Jews, huh, or Hebrews, Israelites, Judeans, Judah, or Jews, Israelites, Hebrews. You guys see that? The lost tribes. All right. A whole other source telling you. He's telling you Lord Kingsborough was thoroughly convinced. It is from the combined series of works which we have thus recapitulated and described that we mean to derive the arguments, inferences, and propositions of this paper. Our object will be, we repeat, to popularize the subject, to extract the sterling metal from the drossy matter which surrounds it, to extricate it from the revolting mass of learned pedantry and their theoretical absurdity. All right, he's going to break all these conjectures and false narratives people try to add to Palenque in the Americas, by which it is at present overwhelmed. In his time, it was still doing it, and they're still doing it now. And to impart to it, as far as lies in our humble power, the brilliancy and concentration which are indispensable requisites for attracting public attention.
We have said that this is an inquiry almost new to the public. We can deduce an extraordinary instance of the ignorance prevailing among literary and scientific men in general, of the immense sources of information from which they have been excluded. All right, this information has not been available to a lot of scholars. All right, by the voluminous pedantry employed upon the subject. It was after the publication of Lord Kingborough's work, that is to say, in 1831, that a correspondent of the Literary Gazette announced a great discovery by a certain Colonel Galindo in New Spain. This now remember New Spain, they're talking about that whole area of Mexico, Mesoamerica, a little bit of the Southwest U.S., right, and Florida. This gentleman, it says, going out one fine morning in the neighborhood of Palenque, stumbled on the ruins of an ancient city, nearly as wonderful in the architectural details of those of Egyptian Thebes. All right, they're not saying lower, they're not saying lesser than, they're saying as wonderful in the architectural details of those of Egyptian Thebes. So is this the original Thebes?
The discovery was announced with great pomp, and the correspondent of the review in question, which is one of great circulation, promised on behalf of the colonel to supply a series of illustrations and descriptions of this astounding discovery. Unfortunately, the result of the colonel's morning adventure turned out to be a complete mare's nest. The fact is that Lord Kingsborough's work, published a year before this event, gave the most ample and minute details in a series of illustrations by Angelo, the artist of the identical ruins stumbled upon by the astonished literatos. The Spanish commissions, headed by Dupaix, had also given equally ample details of this ruined city. Humboldt exhibited some of the sculptures, and finally the whole of the ruins had been examined, described, and drawn with great fidelity by Del Rio. In the publication to which we have already adverted, this circumstance is alone sufficient to show that the subject is, unlike Egyptian antiquities, comparatively new to the reading British public. It is for us to show in the ensuing remarks that it is as attractive, useful, and important as it is new.
The first and strongest conviction which will flash on the mind of every ripe antiquarian while surveying the long series of Mexican and Toltecan monuments preserved in the various works to which we have briefly called attention is the similarity which the ancient monuments of New Spain bear to the monumental records of ancient Egypt. All right? While surveying them, the glance falls with familiar recognition on similar graduated pyramids, on similar marks of the same primeval Ophite worship, on vestiges of the same triune and solar deity, on planispheres and temples which, though characterized by some distinctions entirely American, are not less worthy of the notice of the Egyptian antiquarian. All right, so he's saying if you've studied the Egyptian archaeology, relics, history, then you would see automatically basically the same things over here in Mexico. Strong resemblances, similarity to the same history. All right. On relics, again, of palaces, at once noble in their architecture and beautiful in their proportions and decorations. On monuments, sepulchral, domestic, religious, or warlike, which deserve the designation of Cyclopean as much as any that are now extant in Italy or Greece. On idols and sculptures, some of rude and some of finished workmanship, exhibiting different eras of civilization, and often presenting the most striking analogy in posture and gesture to the monumental style of sculpture and of statuary preeminent called Egyptian. Lastly, the eye of the antiquarian cannot fail to be both attracted and fixed by evidences of the existence of two great branches of the hieroglyphical language, both having striking affinities with the Egyptian, and yet distinguished from it by characteristics perfectly American. One is the picture, writing peculiar to the Mexicans, in which displays several striking traits of assimilation to the anaglyphs in the historical tablets of the Egyptian temples. The second is a pure hieroglyphical language, to which little attention has been hitherto called, which appears to have been peculiar to the Toltecans, or some still more ancient nation that preceded the Mexicans, which was as complete as the Egyptian in its double constituency of a symbolic and a phonetic alphabet, and which, as far as we can judge, appears to have rivaled the Egyptian in its completeness. Again, they're saying that this language, right, this hieroglyphical system, not only symbolic in pictures, but phonetic. It sounds like how Egyptians would sound, right? The phonetic alphabet of the Egyptian. And also appears to have rivaled the Egyptian in its completeness, while in some respects it excelled it in its regularity and beauty. So it excelled even more complex and beautiful than the Egyptian hieroglyph. The brief and cursory sketch, which we have thus given for the convenience of the reader by way of preface or overture, is indispensable to remove prejudices. All right, you must remove your prejudices. All right, they're going to show you, which may have been excited through the low estimate formed by Robertson and others. And this Robertson is one of those guys who says that you couldn't find any pyramids here, and that all these mounds were just dirt mounted up together and grass grown on it. It wasn't really nothing. So he clearly had a plan and an agenda when he was writing his accounts of America. So this guy is saying in this article, that this is because of what's happened and what has been said before. That people are so confused and indoctrinated. And they have to remove their prejudices, as he says. All right, so that includes all of us. The real fact is that the depreciated view of Mexican antiquities results in a great measure from an anachronism carelessly allowed to establish itself among literary men. All right? So it has been allowed, who have not deeply examined the subject respecting two eras and two nations. All right? So this is still happening. It will be our province to extricate the subject from the confusion thereby caused. All right? You're stuck in confusion. A brief enumeration of a few facts will show upon what slight foundation Dr. Robertson must have built his careless appreciation of the monuments of New Spain. A mania existed in his time, as it does now, in favor of the stupendous importance of everything connected with the Egyptian monuments. Now, what is the simple fact? Pyramids, not inferior to Egyptian, exist in many parts of Mexican territories and of New Spain. And we can include, all over the Americas, thousands of pyramids, all over all the continents of the Americas. All right. Some of these pyramids are of larger base than the Egyptian, and composed of equally permanent materials or greater materials. We know UB2 News, shout out to him for putting out that video showing us how it was all concrete. King Drop also showed that it was all like the so-called Roman material or temples, right? It's not megalithic like in the Americas. Vestiges of noble architecture and sculpture are visible at Cholula, Otumba, Oaxaca, Mitlan, and Tlaxcola. The mountain of Texcoca or Texcosa is nearly covered with ruins of ancient buildings. The ancient town of Palenque exhibits not only excellent workmanship in the temples, palaces, private houses, and baths, but a boldness of design in the architect, as well as skill in the execution, which will not shrink from a comparison with the works of at least the earlier ages of Egyptian power. So the earlier ages, right? Ancient Egypt, right? The first dynasties, because ancient Egypt was in America. In the sanctuaries of Palenque are found sculptured representations of idols, which resemble the most ancient gods of Egypt and Syria. Again, in the sanctuaries of Palenque are found sculptured representations of idols, which resemble the most ancient gods of Egypt and of Syria. Palinspheres and zodiacs exist, zodiacs, which exhibit a superior astronomical and chronological system to that which was possessed by the Egyptians. A superior, again, superior astronomical and chronological system to that which was possessed by the Egyptians. Let's not forget, this is from Harvard University. At Midland, there exists the remains of a palace which is of considerable extent. Its architecture, though distinguished by characteristics peculiarly American and different from that of any nation with which we are familiar, is to our view marked by features of stately grandeur and melancholy beauty. The roof of the portico is supported by plain cylindrical columns, no type of which we believe elsewhere exists. It doesn't exist anywhere else. The facade of the palace is covered with a beautiful matwork of basket scroll, which is a characteristic ornament of all the Toltecan monuments, which is often found in the sepulchral chambers of the same extraordinary people, and which Rossellini, by a singular coincidence, found in those of Egypt, among others of the magnificent scroll ornaments, copies of which decorate his liberations. Again, so they're telling you they're finding these symbols, these hieroglyphs, these designs, all right, and scrolls from Egypt. All right, again, where is the duplicate? It is curious that the ground plan of this palace is the Egyptian Tau. Again, it is curious that the ground plan of this palace is the Egyptian Tau. All right? The Egyptian Tau. Again, the T or the cross, the Tau, the Taf. It's Aboriginal, Paleo Hebrew, one of the letters. Right? The cross sticks where energies intersect. A sacred place, a monument, the emblem of the Garden of Eden. The city of gold, X marks the spot, right? All right. Finally, statues sculptured in a purely classical style, unlike the rude deformities of Mexican art, have been found in the neighborhood of Otumba, Mitlan, Xochicalco, and the magnificent flower temple of Oaxaca, or Waka, right? Waka, Wakanda, sacred place. These are not the works of barbarians, as Robertson intimates. All right, so these weren't barbarians building these, having no metal implements to work with. This misconception is the result of the before mentioned confusion of two errors, and this confusion continues today. We got to break that. We got to really do research. Oh, wake up, open mind. You got to prove your theories. You got to really research. Right? It is true that the Mexican semi-barbarians produced their root sculptures with stone utensils, but the civilized people who preceded them worked with copper implements, some of which have been discovered in their tombs. All right, so they're clearly telling us that there's two different kinds of people here. One with science, architectures, math, civilization, and another one that came after that has just simple, as they say here, see, rude sculptures with stone utensils. Vases agreeing both in shape and ornament with the earliest specimens of Egyptian and Etruscan pottery have been found in their sepulchral excavations. Moreover, evidences of an amount of civilization and of social comfort which are not to be found among the popular and boosted monuments of Egypt are furnished by the architectural memorials of this great, singular, and almost unknown people. They're talking about you, and they say that you are unknown, and they say that you disappeared. All right, so again, this guy's just saying, there's evidences of amount of civilization and social comfort which are not to be found among the popular and boasted monuments of Egypt. It just shows basically what he's saying. You're just seeing pyramids, but you're not seeing the whole town, the whole city, the aqueducts. Where's everything else? You can find that in Mexico. They just found 60,000 structures in the jungles of Guatemala. Well, they just released the information to us. Who knows how long ago they know about it? 60,000 structures, right? Um, this was a metropolis. It basically rewriting history. Millions of people lived there. Clean streets, aqueducts, highways, fortified, monuments. All right, dig into it. Roads are to be found not only in the vicinity of their great cities, but at considerable distance from them. Like I just said, all these ancient ruins are all connected by roads and highways in the middle of the jungle. That's what they're realizing, they're letting us know. And this book is from 1836, this article. Why didn't they teach us this in school? Who knows? We might have become archaeologists. We might have had an interest to dig into this stuff, to our own history, knowing that it was greater than Egypt and vast and magnificent and grandeur. We would have probably been the archaeologists discovering and writing about this today. All right, but we weren't given that chance. They told us everything was over there and that side over there, everywhere else but here. All right. Again, roads are to be found not only in the vicinity of their great cities, but at considerable distance from them, artificially constructed like the Roman military roads of large squared blocks of stone. These roads, on the same principle as the railroad, affect a continued level. They are in fact viaducts, as contrasted with aqueducts, which these people also constructed, where they traverse acclivities. They are parapeted, and the evidences both of regular posting stations at regular intervals and of the regular division of the distances upon the principle of our milestones upon turnpike roads are still to be observed. Bridges constructed of the same durable materials and traversing mountain torrents are also to be found. Where is all this in the so-called old world and the other side in Egypt? Where is all this? High science, high civilization. In these bridges, an approach to the principle of the arch and keystone may be in a few instances discerned, but generally they display the primitive and obvious form of architraves of stone, superimposed on two or more piers of the same massy character and durable materials. Every feature of these structures is at once singular, ingenious, and gigantic. Ingenious and gigantic. Cyclopean in the forms of their masonry, they are characterized throughout by the same titanium character of wild and exaggerated grandeur.
The older monuments of New Spain, which are most important and which most strikingly resemble the Egyptian, are in fact not Mexican, he says. The term Mexican antiquities, as far as they are concerned, is a misnomer because he means they're not really Aztecan because he's relating the Mexicano, when you say Mexican, to Mexican or Aztec because it was built by somebody else before them. So it is a misnomer, as he's saying it. It is indispensable to bear this distinction in view. They are the monumental relics of a great nation, whose existence at the time of the Spanish conquest had become a matter of vague record under the name of giants and wandering masons. The traces of whose social civilization had been in many respects obliterated by the incessant eruptions of barbarous tribes from the north. From the north, coming down. We know the migration stories of the people, right? In some respects, partially repaired or renewed. Sufficient evidences remain that this nation, which had long passed away from the central seat of its triumph in New Spain at the time of the Spanish conquest, was a most polished and powerful nation. It has been agreed to call the monuments left by them Toltecan, but our decided conviction is that their erection dates back much further than the era assigned to the Toltecans, who preceded the Mexicans by 600 years. Listen to the chronology, different waves, different migrations, people occupying the same territory. That's why we can't generalize. Our opinion is that many of the monuments exhibited in the numerous and splendid illustrations of the works under review are coeval with the Egyptian or Etrurian, Etruscan, so-called Romans, pre-Romans like Idumeans. Many of them were furthermore believed, and it will be our province to demonstrate the proposition by evidence, are, as the Indians in fact told their Spanish conquerors in the armies of Pizarro and Cortez, the works of the nation called giants and of a wonder in masons. Now every scholar knows that these terms are merely exchangeable terms employed in every district of ancient Europe to designate the Cyclopean family, who were called by the same names in ancient Greece and Italy. All right, the mythology, it connects to real people in America. Now, these giants coming down, these masons, we talking about mound builders. Remember what they found in the mounds? Who came down? Exactly. Our impression is that the Indians were right in the designation which they gave them, and that the monuments of New Spain, we mean those which we are now especially referring, for some of them are clearly of later origin, are in reality Cyclopean. That's what he wants to call these ancient monuments. It will be advantageous to establish this point of affinity and clear it at once from our path before we enter upon the succeeding steps of the investigation. It is our opinion, and we have given reasons for the inference in a former paper, that the pyramids, being nothing more or but more irregular form imparted to the sepulchral, cairn, cairn, or structures which may be generally pronounced peculiar to the shepherd or cyclopean community. Shepherd, huh? There was a distinct record in Egypt that the Great Pyramid, not improbably the model of all the others, was built by that people. Dodge the hijack they've seen in reverse, and that is a lot younger than what they're finding in Americas. That's a theme park over there. That's possibly one of the original world fairs over there they built in so-called Egypt of today. Those monuments over there are more like a theme park. Might have been one of the first world fairs in the 1700s, 1800s. I don't know. We're still digging. I don't think it's ancient. We definitely know. Shout out to Paul Cook. You know that's geopolymer they built that with. That's concrete, not megalithic. Uninscribed pyramid or temples appear to have distinguished them in Egypt, as the truncated form imparted to inscribed palaces, and temples would have appeared to have characterized the race which expelled and succeeded them. Wherever the expelled community wandered or were driven, their location was distinguished by the same unvarying type both of their architecture and of their government. We cannot do better than repeat the description which we gave of them in reviewing Rossellini, the republican forms of government of the great pastoral community, as Aristotle proves in his history of all the republics, clearly assignable to this extraordinary race. So look what they're saying. They're trying to say, hey, it's the same people who build again. Then they're seen in reverse though. But hey, listen to what they're saying. It might be connected somehow. And generally embracing a community of goods were disseminated throughout the world wherever their wanderings led. These people carried with them in their wanderings all the favorite forms of the pastoral or cyclopean architecture: pyramids, gateways, triangular or graduated arches without the keystone, cellular cairns, unsculptured initiatory caverns, irregular courses of colossal masonry, cylindric columns, and rock-built fortresses, which wherever they are found attest their presence. All right, literally, he's telling you same thing, same people that are talked about in the old world, referred to as these pastoral cyclopean uh, wandering masons. It's the same ones he said we're here, and we know this is the true old world. So hey, what are they telling you? All that started here was brought out to the rest of the world.
These facts being admitted or established, the question is, do the monuments of New Spain, as displayed in the illustrations of the works under review, correspond with three unvarying and identifying characteristics? Our reply is yes, they correspond entirely. Some of the pyramids, as we have said, are larger than those of Egypt. Some of them are different in their model, having somewhat of an Indian character, bearing strong affinity to pyramidal temples still extant in Japan. And it says, see the works of Sir Thomas Raffles for that. The Pyramid of Cholula exhibits a most singular identity with the model of the temples of Belus. Okay, so again, the Pyramid of Cholula exhibits a most singularly identity with the model of the temples of Belus. Belus Jupiter, Bel, Tower of Babel, described by Herodotus, and which by many scholars has been considered to be the scriptural Tower of Babel. All right. It consists of the 8 graduated square towers, each rising above the other, and terminating in a topmost sanctuary, dedicated apparently to the same solar god, but there are more singular analogies between the forms of some of the pyramids of New Spain and some of the most ancient pyramids of Egypt. Among the pyramids on the plain of Saqqara is one consisting of 4 graduated steps. The illustrations of the Antiquities Mexicanas furnish a copy of the Mexican pyramid of exactly the same form and nearly the same dimensions. So again, which one is the duplicate? They try to tell us that, this is that these Aztec and Mayan temples are a lot sooner, that they are not as old as the Egyptian pyramids, but we're crushing all this illusion, all this hijack, chronology wise, history wise, right? So again, the illustrations of the Antiquities Mexicanas, and that's the book I told you, this 9-volume book by Lord Kingsborough. It's available online. Just Google it. Says it furnishes a copy of the Mexican pyramid of exactly the same form and nearly the same dimensions as the one in Egypt, in the plain of Saqqara. I look it up. Again, descending galleries at a particular astronomical angle of declination lead to central chambers, either for the purpose of mystery or sepulture, in the Mexican pyramids as well as the Egyptian. Quite enough has been said to prove the architectural identity. It is fair to infer that tribes of the same architectural family built both. Okay, again, it is fair to infer that tribes of the same architectural family built both. In that case, they would be contemporaneous, but the evidences of the same affinity or identity multiply as we proceed. There are numerous rock-hewn monuments scattered throughout Central America, which the natives call granaries of the giants. Granaries of the giants. I'm reminded of the Old Testament, Joseph, right? In Egypt, the 7 years of prosperity and the 7 years of famine. They stored the corn, right? The corn, which is American. Not talking about wheat, we're talking about corn. If you've seen my corn videos, you know what I'm talking about. So, again, says that in Central America there's large granaries of the giants, right? But which in every respect resemble the Cyclopean fabric near Argos in Greece, called the treasury of Atreus. So where's the real treasury of Atreus? The form of these structures is generally dome-shaped. A gallery leads to a central room, which is lighted by a cavity from the dome. In some cases, the doorway to this gallery resembles, in its cyclopean structure, the gate of Mycenae. But there are some singular exceptions, in which a knowledge of the arch and of the keystone, and the same thing has been proved by Rossellini and Belzoni to have existed anciently in Egypt, is clearly assignable to these architectural barbarians. Again, sepulchres have been found constructed on the very same model as those of Cyprus and Asia Minor, which probably preceded but were at all events contemporary with the most ancient monuments of Egypt. Right? So look what they're telling us. That these monuments, he's saying they are in the same time as the monuments of Egypt. So if Egypt is older, they've been teaching us all our lives, why are they saying it's old if it's on the same time as this guy is saying it? But we know we are older over here. You know? Do you know how to do carbon 14 dating? Do you understand carbon 14 dating? It doesn't even go past 10,000 years. And how they use it is controversial. It's disputed by many scholars. New York Times article, look it up. You know, there's way more articles than that, but I'm just telling you, look it up. You know, we got to trust their chronology and their science because we were never, given the opportunity to learn this. You know, this was stripped from what we knew, anciently. You know, these tribes of America had this ancient science and knowledge way before it was taken over there. They are generally in the form of the Egyptian cross. Again, they're talking about the monuments they're finding here in America and Mexico. We're talking about contemporary with the most ancient monuments of Egypt again. And it says they are generally in the form of the Egyptian cross. So is it really an Egyptian cross? A sloping passage intended to be closed leads to a vestibule supported by a single column and ornamented with the mat-work scroll, out of which branch sepulchral chambers to the right and left. In the Antiquities Mexicanas, rock-built fortifications are exhibited, which precisely resemble similar cyclopean structures at Tiryns and Perugia. The walls of their cities and fortresses are built of rough stones, irregularly fitted into each other and arranged in irregular courses, precisely as all the walls of known Cyclopean origin, discovered in Greece and Italy, are constructed. There is another and still more remarkable instance of the architectural identity which we are endeavoring to demonstrate. Some of their palaces, but more especially the combined temple, palace, and city of Palenque, are characterized by the well-known Cyclopean arch consisting of receding steps of stone in a triangular form. At Palenque, a rectangular square is surrounded by cloisters built in this manner, being lighted by windows bearing the exact form of the Egyptian Tau. Again, in Palenque, you're going to find a rectangular square surrounded by cloisters. It says here, built in this manner, being lighted by windows bearing the exact form of the Egyptian Tau or the Ankh, right? Let's take a deep breath because it's a lot to take in, not because it's new to me, but it's just amazing how much has been left out of the textbooks in our history classes, right? In high school, in middle school, even elementary school, right? We have thrown a rapid glance over the architecture and over the sculptures which exist in New Spain, in the various ruined monuments of the extraordinary and powerful nation, whose empire, along with every certain memorial of their name, has long passed away. Is still here. We shall proceed to draw upon the descriptions and illustrations in the works before us for an equally brief and, we hope, perspicuous and popular view. First, of their personal characteristics and costume. Second, of their religion and religious rites. Third, of their hieroglyphical language, and of the state science among them. We purpose to conclude by inquiring into the origin of these extraordinary people, whence they came, who they were, how it was that they imbued the mythology of New Spain with the most striking analogies to the mythological system, which is known to have existed in the most remote times in Egypt, India, and even Italy. We shall advert in the course of this inquiry to the theory especially taken up by Lord Kingsborough. Now he's going to talk about how, Lord Kingsborough and his work, we read earlier again, that basically Lord Kingsborough was an Irish antiquarian who sought to prove that the indigenous peoples of the Americas were a lost tribe of Israel, right? His principal contributions was in making available facsimiles of ancient documents and some of the earliest explorers' reports on pre-Columbian ruins and Maya civilization. Facsimiles, meaning exact copies. He was onto something.
So again, returning, the theory of Lord Kingsborough, as they're saying here, the theory that they were Jews and that even the Mexicans who succeeded them were a tribe of the Hebrew nation. All right, you guys see, Lord Kingsborough, he did mad work, very important. We shall inquire into the probability of this startling and rather eccentric theory. We propose to conclude the whole inquiry by the aid of such facts and evidences as we shall be able to bring forward, with establishing a hypothesis that will satisfy our readers and will at all events be pronounced not at all improbable, if not entirely capable of demonstration.
The personal characteristics, physiognomy, and custom of the extraordinary nation, whose monuments we are discussing, and whom, for the sake of avoiding confusion and prolixity, we shall call Toltecans, although we doubt the strict propriety of the designation, will be found among the illustrations of Castaneda, accompanying the original work of Dupaix, and which are copied by the artists employed in the Antiquities Mexicanas, published in Paris at the Bureau of Mexican Antiquities. Both, however, merely reproduce and thereby honorably prove the accuracy of the illustrations published long previously by Captain Del Rio in his description of the ruins of an ancient city. The sculptures in question are the most extraordinary and bring before us a people as extraordinary as if they appertained to another planet. All right, so they're trying to bring you to space. All right, so let's stay grounded. Their physiognomy is unlike any of the various families of the human race, with which any other sculptures or monumental records have previously rendered us familiar. Their receding forehead, their low facial angle, and the conical form of their heads would, according to the ordinary principles of the craniologists, indicate little short of idiotism, did we not perceive on the very monuments where the elementary data of craniology would seem to testify against them. Marks of a powerful, civilized, and enlightened people. The sculptures which reveal these novel characteristics in the outward form and lineaments of a distinct nation are bas reliefs which appear in the form of metal-piece on the square pilasters, which, alternating with similar square doorways, form the outward facade of the Cyclopean cloisters, which surround one of the rectangular courts of the great temple of Palenque. The architectural forms with which these sculptures are associated are as unique as the sculptures themselves. Yet, is there a general resemblance to the metatopies of the Greek temples? Inasmuch as in the instance of the Pantheon itself, two analogous figures appear on each tablet, one of the victor, the other of the vanquished. Other physiognomical characteristics not less singular than the low angle of their facial elevation mark the countenance of the extraordinary people, thus curiously preserved for our inspection. The nose is large, long, and prominent. Again, the nose is large, long, and prominent, so much so as to amount to a deformity when contrasted with the receding forehead. The facial line recedes in the same singular manner from the base of the nostrils to the termination of the chin. But as if these curious physiognomical signs were not sufficient to distinguish them from any race of people with which we are acquainted, the receding angle of the lower portion of the face is grotesquely broken by an unsightly protrusion of the lower lip. These are the general characteristics of the nation. But there are some of the sculpture which depict individuals less revolting to the European standard of physiognomical beauty. These characteristics are still more important than they are singular, inasmuch as we think they will help, in the course of the ensuing investigation, to furnish tolerably clear views of the origin, or at least of the original location, of the people. We follow the subject into the next division. According to the line we have chalked out, we mean the custom of the people, represented on the metalpiece in question, as well as in the sanctuaries and on the walls of different temples. It has been rather rashly intimated in a learned periodical which glanced at the subject some few years ago that the costume in question is perfectly Egyptian. Again, they're talking about what they're finding in Mexico. Let's not get lost, right? This is not the case. There are some striking analogies with the Egyptian costume, but there are at the same time differences from it as striking. The Egyptian apron, compared with the corresponding Toltecan covering, was very different. It was generally a striped cotton folded in a peculiar manner, a portion of it forming a girdle, and passing between the legs, resembling a similar article of dress worn by the East Indians at the present day. But the Toltecan apron resembles the Roman military apron. Again, but the Toltecan apron resembles the Roman military apron or the Scottish filibeg. Thanks and thanks to King Drop for showing us, forbidden histories of America. I believe, yeah, Toltexus, right, and Theodorus, right, talking about Roman. So, continuing says, it descends from the waist and covers the thigh down to the knee. It is, however, distinguished by one Egyptian apprentice, namely by the mimic tail of an animal, which appears as a mark of ancient origin, probably to have adorned the Toltecan hero as it adorned the Egyptian demigod. All right, and you know what? We're talking about Wakanda for life here. We're talking about the Jaguar warriors, the suits they wore. They did have tails, you know, and a lot of their drawings and the murals and the walls, you can find this. All right. All right. So that's Wakanda they're talking about. So they're saying that this is a mark of ancient origin, probably. All right. So we can find it in the people wearing it in Americas, but in Egypt, you'll find it in mythology, in the demigods. Because, again, the mythology of Egypt and Babylon, they're just retelling the stories of the ancient world of America. The antediluvian world, Atlantis, by Ignatius Donnelly, he clearly lets us know that, most of the gods of Greek, Romans, and all that came from Atlantis, right? And who was the Atlanteans? All right, so again, continuing says, nothing like a tunic supported by straps, sometimes covered by a cuirass and girdled at the waist, which was the dress of the military, in superior class in Egypt is to be found in the Toltecan custom. And you guys starting to understand. The apron is supported by a baldric, which descends from the right shoulder to the left side and joins the girdle at the waist. There are, however, some strong resemblances. Thus, the breastplate and collar of the Toltecans were sometimes decorated with a symbol of the sun. The armlets, bracelets, and ankles strikingly resemble the Egyptian. But the legs of the Toltecan heroes are invested with sandals, some of them reaching above the ankles and strikingly resembling the Roman. Some of them, like greaves, cover the leg as high as the lower part of the knee, and some of them, in every respect, seem to resemble the Highland sandal, so minutely indeed, as even to imitate the same diagonal cross-line pattern. The patterns of the stuffs of which the aprons are made are often various and elegant, sometimes flowered, diamonded, or leopard spotted. All right, so they're saying leopard. We know if we're in America, I don't know why this guy is saying leopard, but if we are talking about the Americas, we are talking about jaguars. All right, not leopards, jaguars, jaguar warriors.
Continuing, rich ornaments of gold, silver, or jewels would seem to have been used on the baldry, the girdle, the fringes of the apron, sorry, fringes, right? Who wears fringes, and the sandals. The apron, thus richly decorated for the male, becomes strictly speaking a petticoat for the Toltecan females, descending as low as the foot, but equally distinguished by variety of patterns and ornaments. All right, you guys hear how very stylish and beautiful these clothing, these costumes were, how they resemble all these old world cultures, some resembling the Roman, some resembling the Egyptian. But that's why, because this is the origin. So as it spread out to the world, it went unique in different areas, right? But as you guys can hear, this is what they're finding here. The whole costume might be safely described as once gorgeous and elegant, and certainly in no wise inferior in either of those qualifications to the Egyptians. It's not inferior, but the effect is greatly deteriorated by the grotesque wildness of the headdress. In the midst of this difference, however, it is curious that there should still be a striking resemblance to the Egyptian style of headdress. The object was in both cases the same, namely to express some symbolical properties peculiar to the wearer. There appears to have been a great variety of these symbolic forms in both cases, but some of the Egyptian headdresses are extremely elegant, some tasteful, some beautiful. Even those that most revolt our notions of correct taste have a certain regularity about them, and the obvious meaning intended to be conveyed by the symbols of which the latter are composed somewhat reconciles us to their incongruous forms. But none of these terms will apply with propriety to the Toltecan headdresses, which generally appear to have been characterized by a grotesque extravagance bordering closely on the absurd. That's his opinion. Gosh, the hijack. The headdresses in question are constructed out of a certain combinations of symbol like the Egyptian, all having no doubt their distinct and combined meaning, but there is neither regularity nor taste, generally speaking, in their separate forms or combinations. There are, however, exceptions. Some of the female headdresses exhibiting the illustrations of Castaneda are graceful and even elegant. At the foot of the Toltecan victor, as represented in these sculptures, generally appear vanquished, enemies either kneeling or in some attitude denoting humiliation. Their costume is plainer, but their physiognomical characteristics denote that they were a family of or tribe of the same nation. The most singular appendages to the Toltecan heroes are the instruments either of war, music, or agriculture, which they hold in their hands. They are grotesque and almost unintelligible. Some of them, however, appear to have been instruments of music, with a great number of strings stretched on pegs. All right, guitars, music, strings, violins, all that. Others are obviously scepters and symbols of different functions or degrees of authority. There is one concluding remark to be made on the Toltecan costume, which is important, as it may contribute to throw light uh, our or on our proposed concluding investigation. Attached to the girdles of some of the Toltecan warriors appear, in the form of a warlike ornament, a head or heads embalmed, in all probability, of their vanquished enemies. All right, you guys hear that? Even little heads on their uh, wow, on their costumes, right? All right, so I think we're gonna leave it there. I hope you guys saw this amazing research exploration that was done and what he concluded and what these people were saying, what they were finding, how they were comparing this to nations of the old world, the same, and you guys already know this is a true old world, just these people are telling it in reverse. This is, just more and more proof, more corroboration, different people telling you all this research that was left out of our learning, our curriculum growing up. They were making us focus on the other side of the world. And as he was saying in the beginning, all this hype about that Egypt over there, and and it's all a legacy, it's all mythology. They have no origin. They can't even prove any of that. All their gods are Westerners. Thoth and all these people came from so-called Atlantis, or the western part of the world. They're not even there. Their gods have American animal heads. You guys already know. But not just that. You guys heard Highland type clothing, Scottish. Like all these things is related. Why we just been learning recently, right? Scoto Egyptian, and now we got recently, last couple of days, the videos about Israelites coming out of Egypt, right? So Egyptian Tefi queen, right? So who's actually the daughter of Zedekiah. People coming out of Egypt, America, coming out of here. You guys see how it all combines, all this. You see how these people were dressed. That's what they're talking about. All right. So the article goes on, to start talking about religion. It adds a lot of conjectures. We might get into it. All right. So get that if you like. We're going to end it here. Again, this was the Foreign Quarterly Review, Volume 18 from 1837. This was a part of the Harvard University Library, Harvard University. Once again, I appreciate you guys taking the time to join me and read along with me. Hope you guys enjoyed the information. This was a lot of really good research, really good information that was left out, that was never told to us. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end. Appreciate you guys. Shout out to my Patreons. Shout out to all my channel members and all the longtime supporters and followers. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.